Good afternoon. It's a real honor and a pleasure to be here. I'd like to thank warmly Margaret, Bruno, and Alice for their welcome, and all the crew who organized so good this conference, especially Kyle and Erin. Thank you so much for your help. I'm sorry, I don't speak English so fluently, so I have to read my paper. And it will be a real pleasure to discuss with you on these topics after this little talk. But I have to ask you to ask your questions very slowly because I'm not sure to understand you so very well. So please excuse my my French accent in English. So. Okay. Yes, I know, Bruno, but I don't hear your French accent. 1968 has been disfigured by certain media and political rhetoric for decades, to the point that it's a real scar. For so many years, it has been indeed pretended to forget that 1968 in France was primarily a general strike, which mobilized about 10 million people, including more than 7 million employees and workers, but also farmers, artisans, high school pupils, and of course, students. It has been also neglected or pretended to forget that one of the characteristics of the event lies in the occupations. I don't have. You can. I don't know. Yes, lies in the occupations of workplaces and public places, public spaces, factories, companies, offices, stations, harbors, post offices, theaters, houses of the culture, youth centers, high schools, and universities. 1968 was then reduced to a kind of party or student game. It must be remembered that students represented only a small minority of the age group, barely 12%. This means that the overwhelming majority of young people were already in the labor market at the age of 16, sometimes less. Certainly, the students could appear as a spark, and thus there were decisive movements even before the beginning of the student movement that also forged 1968. What should be done to help break this cliché and deformations? First, of course, an archival work. And for my part, I worked on very numerous and abundant sources. To give you an idea of the vertiginous dimension of these archives which are available, at the National Library of France, 10,000 documents are kept on 1968. Leaflets, posters, photos, minutes of meetings, text of action committees, strike committees, union and political reports, but also documents from the right and the far right. I also worked a lot on the police archives. Those, among others, of the police prefecture of Paris, those of secret services and the prefects. I also made a large tour of France's departmental archives to find public and private sources. I didn't want to focus on the only worker strongholds and big cities that played an important role in 1968. I wanted to understand what happened in all kinds of areas with different social, professional, geographical, and political profiles. It was exciting, and I would have liked to continue, go beyond the 25 department archive centers because it was so vivid. I have remarked that everywhere something happened. In Guéret, as in Perpignan, I don't know if you know these cities, or in small factories scattered in rural areas. Just as it is important to decentralize the study from Paris or Nanterre or the Paris region, without forgetting them, obviously, it is important not to focus only on the only month of May 1968. 68 is not only May. First upstream, there were many social struggles throughout the years, months, and weeks before. Hence, 1967 was a year of peak strikes. We should think, for example, of the Rhodia-Seta strike in Besançon and Lyon, with the first occupation of the factory and an insistence on workers' dignity, the opposition to the alienating mechanics of work. We are men and women, not robots, said a slogan in Rhodia-Seta, in Besançon. The first great moment of 1968, in January and February, was a very important strike in Caen, in Normandy, among young workers revolted against the weakness of their wages and the hardness of their working conditions. This very hard strike with violences with the police forces. This very hard strike is a symbol of 1968, and that's why the prefect of Calvados in Normandy, Gaston Pontal, insisted this strike was dangerous for the authorities and it could reproduce on a national scale. The peculiarity of this movement in Caen was also that students, tertiary employees, teachers, and peasants came to join the workers in the demonstrations. These important social movements during the 1960s relativize the expression Glorieuses sorties, les 30 Glorieuses, which is used for this period. This is a period where people were working a lot. France was the country in Europe where one worked the most, with weeks of 46, 48, or even 50 hours of work. Many wages were very low. The working conditions were overwhelming. The employers often very authoritarian. In factories, one worked in state. Social inequality shades the image of a prosperous society and a stable growth rate. 5 million people were living below the poverty line. Is it possible to say that? Poverty line? Yes, thank you. So as you can see here, there were shanty towns, for instance, in Nanterre, just near the important university campus in Nanterre. Where a lot of Algerian families lived. Half houses had no running water or toilets. 1/3 of housing was considered overcrowded. One began to talk about unemployment, as you can see here, with the slogan of the CGT, the trade union CGT, against unemployment, or here, the beginners of unemployment, especially for young people. The social tensions were therefore very strong. 1968 was not a flash in a calm sky, even if it remained an event, that is to say, an eruption, a surprise, the strength of the unexpected and the unheard for. What deeply animated this movement was a great hope of changing life, to imagine a more egalitarian society, more social justice and emancipation. Therefore, what has interested me was the innumerable projects that were forged by the protagonists of the social and political movement. Sometimes modest projects of reforms, or sometimes revolutionary but always precise and never abstract projects. I wanted to offer a comprehensive story of the event. I tried to do it for all of its protagonists, not only the protesters, the militants, the strikers, but also the other side, the police in its diversity, also the power in all its forms, thanks to archives of the Élysée and the ministries, the prefects at the departmental level. Finally, the right and the extreme right. In short, the opponents of the strike, those who claimed a return to the moral, social, and political order. One had to understand their motives, their feelings, and their fears too. So I tried to write a book which is composed of 4 parts, which vary the scales, local, national, and international. The first deals with protagonism. That means the dynamics of mobilization, the encounters between the working, student, and agricultural worlds. This type of encounters were numerous and diverse in many forms of solidarity, collects for strikers, support on the picket lines, struggles together against the police, universities open to the workers, food aid with the support of young farmers or fishermen, and so on. In this part, I tried to examine also the tumultuous relations between the political groups so active in 1968 and the French Communist Party. As you can see here, it was critical by some drawers as Ciné, with this communist leader, take me the pictures of the 2 rabbits and its Marx and Lenin, because there was a struggle between French Communist Party and all the groups which were called the leftists. It should be noted that everyone spoke at this time of revolution. Even the intelligence services that ensured that in many places the situation was revolutionary. Even the Gaullists who broadcast posters, come make the revolution with de Gaulle, come make the revolution in peace and work, but not the Communist Party, which didn't want to talk about revolution, which considered it all that as romantic, unrealistic, and focused on the so-called material demands, such as wage increases, an important issue since many wages were actually very low at this time. So I also devoted, and of course, a chapter to the dimension that is not only international, but also transnational and internationalist. One cannot understand 68 without the gaps that open up all over the world in the heart of the Cold War. A breach in the East with Polish dissidents whose texts circulated a lot in Western Europe and in United States too, and the Prague Spring, of which the participant claimed a democratic socialism against the authoritarian and bureaucratic regime, and breach in the West with huge protests, of course, all over the world against US military intervention in Vietnam. And I'd like to insist here on this transnational dimension of the event. The events in France, indeed, in 1968 are only readable through the prism of a larger world. The international dimension was more than mere context. It was a serious call to arms for anyone ready to take part in a transnational mass movement that was indifferent to the traditional frontiers of nations. It is true, of course, that not all of those involved had the same internationalist outlook. The students were the quickest to embrace these facts. They were also the most determined to take advantage of these new possibilities for international action by using their own networks for moving people and information from place to place. The time students had available new modes of transportation, making it possible to travel freely, and the political turmoil affecting universities everywhere gave them a clear edge in this regard. The ongoing revolutions in China and Cuba and the Vietnam War, of course, were viewed as potential breaches in the established order. The world's hegemonies were showing themselves to be vulnerable. Both systems of domination, Eastern and Western, looked to be weakened. Even the relative harmony of their coexistence was under threat. Both camps faced destabilization and challenges. Cuba had touched a nerve, not only because of the charisma of Che Guevara, whose recent death had intensified his aura, but also thanks to its brand of internationalism. Between 1966 and 1968, Fidel Castro's regime had shown itself to be unafraid to criticize the Soviet Union or take a leading role in fomenting revolution in other countries. In May 1968, the Centre d'Information pour la Révolution, an action committee in Paris, described the Cuban revolutionaries as poets of action. Vietnam was more than a mere backdrop. A whole generation had already identified the fighting there as the next stage on the battle against colonialism and imperialism, following the Algerian War of Independence. Opposition to the American military intervention was one of the most violent points of protest. At the University of Nanterre, just outside Paris, the March 22 movement was created in protest against the arrest of a militant belonging to the Vietnam National Committee. 2 days before, the windows of the American Express office in Paris had been smashed. An action justified in a tract that defines the international support coalescing behind the American students who were burning the draft papers for enrollment in the US Army. On June the 10th, in the midst of a strike which had spread across France, the Tribune du 22 Mars published a communiqué issued by the anti-imperialist Organization of American Deserters and Conscientious Objectors. Within the French student movement, what was happening day by day in Berkeley, in Columbia, in Berlin, in Trento, in Louvain, in Belgium, was instantly circulated. The same was true of events in Prague or in Warsaw. Interest in the news from abroad was sharpened by practical experience, daily student meeting, and the rapid circulation of information. On February the 17th and 18th, around 500 French militants traveled to Berlin to join a protest march against the war in Vietnam. After the horrific near-fatal shooting of the German activist Rudi Dutschke in Berlin on April the 11th, there were huge protest marches in France. New revolutionary texts were favorably translated, among them the Manifesto for a Negative University, devised by the students of the University of Trento in Italy, which rejected official control and proposed counter courses. That means courses held without officially appointed lecturers. These were subversive, to say the least. Meanwhile, as the international press relayed news of this contestation, students poured into France from every corner of Europe to join the insurrection. Among them, a group, for instance, of British students who joined the march on the Renault factory in Boulogne-Billancourt. The original goal of this march was to make common cause with the workers. The student movement set out to show its solidarity with the workers. to break the social divide between intellectuals and manual workers, and to help strikers by standing on the picket lines, shoulder to shoulder with them. Police archives show that from the earliest day of the student action in May 1968 to the final extinction of the movement at the end of June, students and young workers fought side by side at the same pitch battles, on the same barricades, and in the same confrontation with riot police. From May the 3rd onward, police arrest records show that sheet metal workers, fifters, ordinary employees from the National Electrical Company and postal services, cafe waiters, delivery men and salesmen all took part in the movement. We also know that many nationalities were represented because the police drew up special files on the foreigners they arrested. There were numerous Algerians and Tunisians, musicians, mechanics and laborers, as well as Italians and Portuguese, specialized workers, restaurant waiters, and site foremen, and more generally, young people from Brazil, the United States, Germany, Britain, Switzerland, Yugoslavia, Cameroon, Senegal, Japan, and Vietnam. Self-organization was the order of the day, with spontaneous committees for foreigners, anti-imperialist committees of the 3 continents, and action committee for the slums put into operation. Word went out from the Sorbonne that for the first time in history, foreigners could be at home in France. Some of the action committees and local committees even demanded the abolition of the status of foreigner, claiming that they deserve the same rights and freedoms as the French. They drew inspiration from the Paris Commune of 1871, whose labor minister was the Hungarian worker Leo Frankel, and whose military head was the Polish worker Jaroslaw Dąbrowski. From this revolutionary perspective, the very concept of nationality seemed reactionary, especially since foreigners quickly became special targets for the police. Once again, the archives of the police and intelligence services reveal mass expulsions from France, and large numbers of people refused entry to French territory. In short, it became dangerous, especially for foreigners, to take part in protests. Yet action committees all over the world continued to mobilize as 1968 war to a close, protesting against the invasion of Czechoslovakia by Warsaw Pact troops in August, and against the savage repression of workers and students in Mexico City in October the 3rd. In the fall of 1968, during the Italian demonstrations, a song could sometimes be heard, ce n'est in French. Ce n'est qu'un début, continuons le combat, don't give up the fight, it's only a beginning. A second part of the book is devoted to the other side of the barricades, the police, the power, and the right-wing movements. It is possible to follow almost hour by hour, thanks to the police archives and the archives of the prefectures, the practices of the police forces. They were very destabilized by what they had in front of them, the courage of the demonstrators, their skill, their know-how. The violence, as you can see here on this different pictures, the violence were prominent with 5 dead people, and among them, here it's the way of protesting against the violence and the struggle between protesters and police forces. And here the police try to break with barricades. And here, among 5 people who died in 1968, there is high school pupil, Gilles Totin, who was 17. At the time, the police had a feeling of being released by the power by Prime Minister Georges Pompidou in particular. This is why the Paris police chief Maurice Grimaud, you can see here on the right, here, Maurice Grimaud, who is a chief of the police in Paris, still encourage his men, congratulate them, reward them, even as the repression of demonstrations were very violent. The power itself was very surprised and in disarray, as shown by some letters written by Charles de Gaulle or Georges Pompidou, who you can see here. For instance, Georges Pompidou's letters show that he evoked a crisis of civilization in front of which the power was vain. We also feel their destabilization when they seek absolutely an internal enemy. In the archives of the Élysée, there is an extraordinary document, an investigation conducted by the intelligence services on the PDG, the president of the huge factory Renault, whose name was Pierre Dreyfus, and he was accused by Charles de Gaulle to be a leftist and to be a danger for the power. The archives of the Élysée also indicate that very many telegrams were addressed to the President of the Republic in order to support him. Even former French Algeria activists offer the help to de Gaulle. This is also why de Gaulle left for Baden-Baden in Germany. The episode is well known. He wanted to make sure he could count on the army, but above all, he understood at the end of May that the French Communist Party will not go to insurrection. He knew that their common interest was to stop the strike and hold elections. In fact, all political parties agreed to participate to the electoral process. However, the event did not end at the end of May when General de Gaulle made a speech and statement and announced the dissolution of the National Assembly. The strike continued and was very hard during the month of June. So you can see here all the demonstrations in support to de Gaulle with former military representatives and the insistence on the Gaullism, which is not dead in 1968, with a lot of young people, because all the young people are not protestators, and there is a focalization on the figure of the German libertarian student Daniel Cohn-Bendit, and a lot of investigation against him, and a way to push him outside France. And for instance, I found a document in the prefecture of Meurthe-et-Moselle in the east of France. And the prefect told the local employers that he could not help them by sending forces against the strikes, against the pickets, because his troops were mobilized at the border in case of Daniel Cohn-Bendit would return in France from Germany. And it happened anyway, appearing against late May in the courtyard of the Sorbonne. So the third part of the book is devoted to what can be called the sensitive experience of politics. Here it's a question of evoking the emotions, the affects, that went through the event. There was so much joy and happiness to participate in it. You could really feel that nothing will be as before. The relationship, yes, and a lot of humor, of course. Poetry was very present during the event, and humor and laughter. As you can see here. Yes, and the relationship with time, with temporalities, was also crucial. The protagonists had the feeling of living a time of quality, a suspended time, an extraordinary time in the strict sense of the term, extraordinary. They also felt very keen to participate in history, to make an event. There was a powerful historicity of 1968 in the sense of a historical consciousness that unfolded in the frequent evocations of the French Revolution, the Paris Commune, the Popular Front, as you can see here in a newspaper during the events in June 1968, or to a lesser extent to the resistance during the World War II. There was also much remembrance of the Algerian War, the independence of Algeria, and not so much the conflict or the war itself as a demonstration which were violently repressed by the police, such as that which took place on February the 8th, 1962, near the Charonne metro station in Paris. And 9 people died during these demonstrations, and among them a very young man, Daniel Ferry, who was 15. And one could hear in 1968, during the first clashes with the police, it's Charonne, c'est Charonne, c'est Charonne. Ils vont recommencer. They will start again about the police. 1968 was a vast movement of free speech. Poetry was very present during the event, and the sensitive experience of politics also involved the relationship to the body. During a sit-in like this, at this time, still seemed very subversive. The bodies were gradually released. One felt less locked in shackles, even if it was not the sexual revolution of which one spoke so much. Sexuality was not yet a political issue. It was very little mentioned, except in libertarian currents. But the event changed the relationship between women and men. It must be strongly emphasized, indeed, that women were very active in 1968. They participated a lot in strike, in demonstrations, in picket lines, as you can see on these pictures. It's a very famous photograph of Caroline de Benden holding the North Vietnam flag here on your right. But male domination was not yet disputed. The male leaders, all the leaders were men, and the male leaders did not raise the question of this domination. It is this tension at the heart of the event, this contradiction between a hope of emancipation and a reproduction of male domination, which explains the advent of a great feminist movement from 1970, especially with women's group, sometimes non-mixed groups, which offer to better free women's speech. The fourth part of the book deals with projects and imagination that arose in 1968. And I would like to highlight those aspects in the last part of this talk. On May the 20th, 1968, the philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre was the interviewer of the student and leader Daniel Cohn-Bendit for Le Nouvel Observateur. It is in itself a reversal. The world-famous philosopher put himself in a position to question and to listen. His conclusion evoked the ability of invention raised during these days, and I quote Jean-Paul Sartre, "What is interesting in your action is that it puts the imagination into power. You have a limited imagination like everyone else, but you have many more ideas than your elders. We have been made in such a way that we have a clear idea of what is possible and what is not. You have a much richer imagination. Something has come out of you that surprises and denies everything that has made our society. This is what I will call the extension of the field of possibilities. Do not give up." End of the quote. The imagination in power became more than the title of this interview, a summary of what was happening. Imagination is an social and collective resource. It can be seen as a practice, a way of acting in a social environment that mobilizes reflection and forms of life. It shows how the protagonists place themselves into a situation of criticism, interpretations of the world, investigating ways of changing life by activating the sense of social justice. The major words of 1968 were those of contestation and revolution. Social and political disobedience expressed the rejection of an imposed order. It revealed and in the same time denounced this order, which until this time seemed obvious. The protagonist took the time that the strike left, this time so different, to disrupt the social, political, cultural, and moral conventions. The event was actually an unveiling. At this point, politics is not primarily the art of leadership. It is not essentially a modality of government. Politics is above all a way of being subject. The philosopher Jacques Rancière gives the name police to what is usually understood by electoral competition, state, constitutional, and institutional functioning. In short, exercise of power which distributes the roles and makes everyone stay in his or her place. The police, in this sense, organizes consent, confirms the division of tasks, and circumscribes politics to a specialty or even a profession. This is why Jacques Rancière prefers to reserve the word politics for the practice of equality and emancipation, a discussion and action on what is common. It involves everyone. We could say that those projects are by some ways utopic, but realistic utopias. Utopia highlights the defects of the existing, according to Eric Olin Wright. It offers to judge what we do in the light of what we could or should do. The quotation lies in his book, Envisioning Real Utopias. The Emancipation Projects, conceived in 1968, express society as it is and propose the outline of a different world. Therefore, what forges 1968, besides revolt and protest, is creativity, all that is imagined to really change life, with the poet Arthur Rimbaud's words. So, reinventing life, as it is said in the occupied Odéon Theatre, you can see here, Odéon est ouvert, le théâtre de l'Odéon est ouvert, assumes that art could be the everyday, and the artist everyone. The streets are our brushes, the squares are our palettes, said Mayakovsky during the Russian Revolution. 1968 echoes with this desire. It is located in a will to break with the social division of labor. Art must not be a world apart, and that's why we can see those kind of paintings painted by workers in the on the walls of their factory, as here, for instance, in Peugeot Sochaux. Art must no longer be a world apart, separated from all for the all commerce. Revolutionary creation was thought as a sharing where latent talents are revealed by all, for all, and at any age. Posters with tremendous success, collective work without stars, indicated what could be a popular art. It is a way here to seek a form of purity where the beauty would be in the street. La beauté est dans la rue. The beauty is in the street. Art would cease to proclaim itself. It would rely on the innocence of its evidences. Places of culture were therefore questioned, and some were transformed due to the event. In the Théâtre of Odéon in Paris, the slogan was, when the National Assembly becomes a bourgeois theater, all the bourgeois theaters must become national assemblies. In Lille, the Théâtre du Pont-Neuf was proclaimed open to all and becomes a place of debate. In Marseille, the National Drama Center hosted assemblies as the Pavillon Populaire de Montpellier and the Théâtre de Verdure in Perpignan did too. Everywhere, the issue was to break with the compartmentalization of words. Criticism was everywhere defined as a questioning of the existing order. The dance community was a singular example. Without any tradition of mobilization, far from the working class, reputed to be disconnected from society. However, a dance action committee met every day in the theater of the Petit Odéon in Paris, and held a general assembly at the Sorbonne, the University of the Sorbonne, in the presence of 200 dancers, especially from Paris Opera. Separations were one more time pointed out. On the one hand, dance was considered cut off from society because of its isolation. The dancer lacks general culture and cannot express her or himself. On the other hand, dance was little considered, reduced most often to the status of entertainment or superficiality. And that's why these dancers were mobilized against this kind of cliches and this situation. The mobilized dancers thought about teaching dance. The traditional techniques indefinitely reproduced were considered ossified. One scrutinized the ways to revive them. Dancers had little relationship with the outside world. It was therefore necessary to acquire knowledge to become social beings and no longer just inspired artists. In return, dance should be better known and better anchored in society. It could help to find back the lost bodies, often forgotten as if they no longer existed. Indeed, in Western countries, the harmony of gestures was generally ignored, and an entire art of life was to be restored. So the committee proposed to introduce dance in primary school to develop a sensitive education and a teaching of the movement to encourage expressiveness during childhood and to feel the possibilities of a collective creation. Young people in high schools, by their side, imagined a different education. Their committees, action committees, deplored a lack of critical sense in the manners of teaching and learning. For instance, at Jules Verne High Schools in Nantes, the committee suggested experimenting with practical solutions to reduce the distance between teachers and students, reconsidering the space of the classes without any hierarchy. In high school in Pau, one considered that programs could be conceived both by teachers and high school students. At Simone Weil High School in Saint-Étienne, the development was more precise and was the subject of a long-developed notebook of grievances. Students defended the self-management of the school and the teaching based on the learning of judgments through the discussion, reduced work units to facilitate public speeches, more varied exercise than the only dissertation, training the spirit of analysis, sensitivity, and curiosity, meetings, discussion, and critical review. Everywhere, the passivity was opposed to the practice of creation and critical thinking. By entering the protest, the protagonists wanted to escape assigned places. As the writer and former worker in factory Leslie Kaplan will later say, we left our cage, we refused the category, the box and the case. We wanted to be something else as a production function. In order to conclude, I have to speak about the question of revolution. Was 1968 a revolution? For lots of people, revolution was there from now on. Of course, it was not achieved. It was a beginning. The feeling of living a revolution actually arose everywhere. For the writer and poet Jean Genet, the initial revolt became the very meaning of the revolution, that is to say, the questioning of all the social forms in which we live. At the Faculty of Science in Paris, a collective text evoked a revolutionary movement unprecedented in our history. General intelligence services, for their part, yet little suspicious of revolutionary aspiration, used the expression to describe the circumstances. In Saint-Nazaire, they portrayed a city in revolutionary situation. In Roanne, they spoke of a whole France shaken by a revolution. The prefect of the Pays de la Loire depicted the experience of the Central Strike Committee of Nantes as a revolutionary measure, even if, of course, he denigrated it. And here you can see the Royal Square in Nantes renamed Place du Peuple, Square of the People. And there is, of course, echoes with the actual situation in France with yellow vests. I will say a few words about it to conclude. But there was a risk that the world revolution ended up overused. As a proof, we have to remember that the Gaullist youth organization brandished the slogan "Young people take part to the revolution with De Gaulle." As you can see here, les jeunes assument la révolution avec De Gaulle. Or, jeunes, venez au CDR, Comité de défense de la République, faire avec nous la révolution dans la paix. Make revolution in the peace and the work and the order and the... The idea is that the revolution did not respond to a fixed pattern elaborated once and for all in the revolutionary places, Winter Palaces, and in Russia in 1917, was vehemently defended by individuals, groups, and trends who are opponents to a rehearsed theories. To overcome the political deficit of legislative democracy, as it was said often during this period, it was necessary to think of a different process. For instance, of the method of successive votes, to think about a direct democracy. On May the 23rd, Michel Rocard, who will be during the 1980s the Prime Minister of François Mitterrand, proposed a lot of revolutionary statements, and he appealed to popular power and to defend the generalization of the occupation of workplaces and the adoption of precise slogans on the establishment of real structures of popular power, to quote him. So capitalism was examined in its foundations, private ownership of the means of production, exploitation, and competition. So, for the conclusion, we can quote this slogan of 1968, "Stop the world, I want to go down." Those were words of spring 1968 between an accelerated time and a desire of suspense to extract oneself from it. Basically, what happened? I have to quote Karl Marx. Marx said about the Paris Commune in 1871 that its success and sense was to have existed. What ultimately matters is that the event upset existences. It made concrete the specter of other futures, revived the possibility of reforms, structural reforms or revolution, and made it tangible and possible, transformed the imagination into an action. Work, culture, age, art, body, and sexuality, even time, history, and historicity have been redesigned. There is not one truth of the event, social movement, general strike, aspiration to revolution. So this conclusion cannot therefore be summarized. On the other hand, we can pick up one of the slogans deployed during this period: everything is political. To make politics a shared thing, the commonplace of all, where everyone can express themselves, deliberate, and decide. The memory of 1968 is not closed. Last year in France, during strikes and student demonstrations, young people evoked the event by refusing to commemorate it, but instead proposing to remake, start again with it. And yes, I'd like to end with some pictures of the yellow vests. If this document, yes. Because you can see, j'ai fait mai 68, je fais novembre 2018. I participated to 1968, I am contributing to this movement in 2018 now. So the current movement of yellow vests is also very reminiscent of the events of the past, the French Revolution, of course, and 1968 in particular. They seem to say this is just the beginning, let's keep fighting. Ce n'est qu'un début, continuons le combat. Voilà. Thank you so much for your attention.